Praise the Lord once again. This is Elder Adrian Heyman, saying to all you saints and friends, thank you and good afternoon. Hope it's been a wonderful day for you. Today I'm going to talk about something that I did speak about before, but I think I need to clarify it a little bit more. And every so often I'll go back and I'll clarify some things that I've said before. This is not about our First Amendment series, our amendments series that's going to continue, but this is not about that. This is actually well, let me kind of roll it out to you. Our president made a speech, I believe it was today, or I think it was today, maybe it was yesterday, and he was very adamant about this thing. And he was saying, under no uncertain terms, that tariffs are a tax on the country that is shipping the product. And I began to think, I was going to do some calculations in my head and how things go, and try as I may want to give him the benefit of the doubt, since he did graduate from Wharton Business School at the University of Pennsylvania. At least that's what he said. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Now, I'm going to give you certain reasons why. Let's say that the tariff on China was kept at 145%. That would mean that if that percentage was a tax on the supplier, that means the one who made the product in China and sent it, then that would mean that that supplier would end up having to pay for selling their product, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Anyone that's going to take their product and put it on the open market expect to get money from it. It may not be a lot, but they expect to get something. They don't expect to pay someone to take their product. That is, even in biblical times, they didn't do that. In fact, I remember we had a Sunday school lesson recently about how David, who was the king, made sure he paid the going rate for a piece of property that he had to get. The going rate. He did not, the person who he purchased from didn't have to pay the king money. David was fair. So that in itself wouldn't make any sense. Even if it was 40% tariff, that means that instead of selling it, let's say for $100, you're actually only selling it for $40. Because the rest of the money that was supposed to come to that particular person would go to this country. It may sound good, but in practice, that's not what happens. And no matter how many times it's said, no matter how many times it's repeated, it's not going to change. A tariff is not a tax on the supplier. It's not. So that means that essentially what will happen is this. A tariff, to be honest, the best way to use a tariff, if you're the country issuing one, the best way to use a tariff is to try to stimulate business at home. Because what it does, it artificially raises the price of a product that comes from overseas. Now, who eats that? In order for it to work, for the purpose of which it was raised for, it is supposed to be an impediment of imports, so that the country can then turn to more homegrown industries. That's what it's used for. If there is a industrial or manufacturing, whatever base that can be used for that, usually it is used for something that the country has, but does not necessarily compete very well against cheaper products from overseas. So what it does is artificially makes the overseas product more expensive. And depending upon how expensive it is, then it may prove to be good for this country to then begin manufacturing more of these products. But how does tariffs actually work? A tariff is placed upon a product that an importer brings from outside. The importer is not someone who was in the other country. An importer is someone that's in this country. Therefore, if you put a tariff on that product, then as I said, it artificially raises the price that the importer must pay. Now that makes sense. If you're paying something, then you're paying something above what you are paying, then that would make sense. It does not make sense for the seller to then start selling his product at well below market prices. Does that make sense for the seller to do that? Otherwise, why should I sell? I'll go to someone else and sell. Because my products are in demand, so I'm going to go somewhere else, to somewhere else. Now, once a product comes into the possession of this importer, the importer has two choices. Number one, or three choices. Number one, eat the tariff itself and sell to the customer who wants that imported product at the same price. Now that sounds good for the customer, but there's a problem. The problem is profit margin, which is what all businesses subsist on. If the profit margin is either too thin or it is non-existent, then there's no use for you to be in business. You're losing money by importing. And you may be able to get away with it if you're a partnership maybe, and you can take less money from a particular product if you sell enough of it. This is how big businesses like Walmart or an Amazon or whatever it happens to be, that's how they're able to survive, because they do it in mass. So then, even though instead of a $5 margin, they only have maybe a $2 margin, and they may be okay with that, but only for a while. Only for a while. That happens at the same time when you also do sales. If you do sales, you take less of a profit margin, hopefully to gain more people to come in, because you're lowering the prices. In this case, you're not lowering the price, but you're eating the increase in the cost, which for a company, they always want, that's the one thing they want to lessen the cost so their profit margins would be greater. Now, again, you can keep it at the same price you sell to your customer, but if you continue to eat the cost of a higher price product, then what will happen is what happened to Sears, what's happened to Kmart, what's happened to Bed Bath & Beyond, and all those other places. You can't afford to stay open. You will close. And after a while, your only way to get out of it is to liquidate everything and get out of the business. That's if you continue to keep the profit margins too small. On the other hand, you can say, you know what, I want to keep it because my shareholders, if you're a corporation, they're really going to be sensitive about that because they want return on their investment. And if their investment return is real small, really small, then there's no way that they're going to be able to justify giving the investors, their shareholders, little bitty margin. They're going to try to get a new chairman. They may take their stock, sell it, and because they don't want, because essentially, your stock is not worth as much. They'll go somewhere else where maybe it's a little bit more profitable. This is all part of accounting. This is all part of business management. Those who got MBAs, you should know this. We should be telling people what this is all about. The other thing, again, as I said, keep the profit margin, but you let the customer pay the cost of the tariff. In other words, it is kind of like an unsaid tax. President may say, don't say tax, don't say tax, don't say tax. It's a tax. Because it's something that's supposed to be going to the government. And it is coming from eventually either the companies of this government or the customers of this government. It's going to hit Americans one way or another. And of course, the higher the price, the less you are willing to pay for that particular product, or the less you have in terms of disposal income to pay for that to pay for that product. Either way, it's bad for the customer. Now, the customer can react one of two ways. Because you need it, you may buy it, but you'll skip on something else, which again leads to a slowdown of the economy. Or you won't buy this product, which means that the importer or the company that takes the money or takes the product from overseas, they have less of a chance to survive, and you may go on an out of business sale and make 20, 30, 40, 80, 90%, but then that place is gone, their employees are gone, and so now you add a lot of other people to the unemployment line, which doesn't do well for the economy. Neither way, a tariff does not affect the one who produces the product overseas, except that it may tell them, because now their product is too expensive for whom they're shipping to, they'll go to another country. And they will go to another country. Well, you may say, the biggest market is the United States. Yes, it is. But there are others that can take the product. There's always someone that can take the product. Remember, the one thing that we've learned in employment, and those of you that have been employed for a while, some of you have been part of, slowdowns. You've been part of layoffs. You've been part of things where you have to give away part of your income to help the company make it. Furloughs. None of these things are good. None of these things are good. But you also learn that you can always be replaced. And that goes not just for individuals, that goes for markets as well. The U.S. can be replaced. So you want to keep thinking about that. You want to think about that. Because if you don't, then you're going to be sadly disillusioned when the world keeps going the way it is and you're left behind. I'm not just talking about the rapture saints. I'm talking about just plain business. Now, let's say what if the tariff is going to affect this country, then what is it good for? You may say that, okay, well, we'll raise more money. But if the tariff is such that you're not going to pay for something anymore, then that means that the tariff expected revenue coming in from tariffs for the government becomes less and less and less, because the product that you are purchasing becomes less desirable because of the price. Therefore, you won't buy it. Therefore, nothing comes to the government. Makes sense. That makes it. That is strictly supply and demand. You lower the price of something, you increase the demand. You heighten the price of something, you decrease the demand. What you do is that you are artificially increasing the price of a product. So the purpose is to not buy the product so that you can buy something else that's similar. That's how a tariff is supposed to work. The problem is, it only works if you have a base of manufacturing that you can then produce the product at somehow of a similar or lower level of cost than what you would get from overseas plus the tariff. That's how it works. If you end up buying something that's about the same price as the tariff, why are you raising the tariff? Because essentially, it only just now makes, unless you're going to just buy American, which you could do. But if you're talking about your household and you're used to buying a particular product that comes from overseas, then what's going to make you change? In other words, we're going to have to revamp a whole way of manufacturing, a whole way of producing products. Because and even though this is good for us as employees, but our wages are higher than just about anyone in the world, which means one thing: what product comes from that is also going to cost that much too, which is the reason why we've been trying to pay for imports in the first place, because they're cheaper and their quality is either not that much lower than what's made in America, and it may even be better. So, when someone says, just to cap it off, make sure we know this. When someone says that a tariff is a tax on another country, start wondering where they got their degree from. Because obviously, even if they're a businessman, somehow they must have skipped that session on that day. God bless you. Love you all.